artists don't always get to be in front of their audiences. Truthfully, if you think about it, it's very rare that that happens. And school visits or library visits or going to the bookstore really puts you in front of the people that you created that story for. And that's special, it's unique, and it's really informational.
Welcome to the Origins of Creativity podcast, brought to you by Bookling Media, where we discover the magic behind creativity through the stories of passionate creators. Listen in and fill your creative vessel with delightful insights and uplifting tales.
In this episode, our guest reflects on how networking shaped his career, how emotional themes drive his work, and how connecting with young audiences bring joy to his creative journey. Our guest today is a children's book author, illustrator, and freelance creative director whose work blends playful chaos with heart. As an alumnus of Warner Brothers and DC Comics, he helped guide legendary brands like Batman and Superman across film, TV, games, and publishing. Today, he's channeling that experience into children's stories, starting with his debut picture book, Float. Thank you for joining me today on the show, Larry Daley.
Hi, Becky. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to have you on. Your picture book, Float, just released on February 3rd, and it's exciting to see that happen. I'm curious to know a little bit more about, before we jump into Float, tell me a little bit about your childhood and what got you into creating and illustrating and everything that you do?
So I think like many kids, I love to color and draw, but I definitely have a couple of distinct memories that got me interested about being an artist. I remember when I was about 6, I had a babysitter who sat us down for a little drawing lesson, and she showed me how to draw Charlie Brown. And this got me incredibly excited because I had never seen anybody do this. Charlie Brown on paper looked exactly like he did in the cartoon. And I wanted to know exactly how she did this. And I think it got me excited about looking for other cartoons, whether it was in the newspaper or trying to copy it off television, that made me feel that this was something that got me so excited that I wanted to draw every cartoon there was out there. Actually, my second memory, now that I think about it, was when I was in 6th grade. By the time that I think kids get to upper elementary, there's sort of a sense of who the artists are. And in my case, there were 3 of us. And my teacher decided to give us a showcase by assigning us each a holiday. He dedicated an entire wall for us to do a mural, and we were each able to do a holiday themed um, illustration. And mine was Thanksgiving, and I ended up doing a large drawing of a turkey poking its head out of the oven to nibble on some food that was on the counter. And I was so proud of this drawing. And I think even putting aside the fact that the kids liked it and thought it was cool, they thought it was funny. And I think that really solidified my interest in trying to figure out a way how I could keep art in my life and potentially do it as a full-time job. So I think those 2 memories really stand out to me as kind of solidifying the feelings I had about being an artist, identifying as one, and really trying to keep that as something that sort of was going to stay through with me as I got older and, got excited about other things that were starting to step into my life that way.
So the humor side of it, were you inspired specifically from that, or were you already kind of silly and kind of creative with comedy in that kind of sense?
I actually love that question because so much of my family experience mirrored, National Lampoon's Vacation. I think it seemed like anything that could go wrong whenever my family did something together, it would. And I just found that not only thrilling as a subject matter, but I would constantly be doing cartoons about every mishap that happened with my family. And my dad in particular loved it, and he would laugh all the time. I don't know, there's just nothing better when your parent gets excited about something that you're doing. So I think for me, it was certainly a love of cartoons like Garfield and The Far Side, but I think it was really being able to document all of these disasters that happened on family vacations that just gave me a whole collection of work as a kid that I think helped inform what I thought was funny and how to create characters that were animated enough to be able to showcase some of those follies. My dad was funny. My mom loved to laugh. I think there was a lot of joy in telling jokes in my family, and it just seemed like a natural extension to be able to express all of that in my artwork. So, yeah, I think humor was a huge part, mostly because it was a way that I felt like I connected with my family, and I think maybe specifically my dad, because I just loved hearing him laugh as well.
I love that. So this has like, evolved for you, and we'll get back into some of the things that has inspired you in the past, but your debut picture book Float will, has just released. But you're no stranger to storytelling at all and creative media. Where did you get your start then professionally? Were you thinking of this through high school and just moving towards that path, or was this something that just kind of you've evolved into?
I think I knew that I wanted to. I'm from New Hampshire, and growing up in New Hampshire, there's not a lot of film and television. I remember growing up and thinking that the Muppets was maybe where I wanted to head. There was just
Oh, neat.
some beautiful combination of monster making and world building that also incorporated all that humor that really made me want to somehow be associated with what Jim Henson was doing and being a part of that. But of course, you have to be in the place where that is going to happen. So it was important to me to go to college, either in New York or California, so that I could be connected to that. And it was in college that I had a really unique opportunity happen to me. I had a professor who had one day come up to me and said, I am looking for someone to be a personal assistant for a friend of mine, but I can't tell you who it is. And I said, I'm happy to do that. And he gave me the address, and I drove out to this little house in the middle of the Hudson Valley. And sure enough, who opened the door was Tim Burton. And
Whoa.
Tim Burton had been working a bit in seclusion on the picture book version of A Nightmare Before Christmas while he was starting to do the initial planning for the film.
Oh, wow.
There was only a couple of us there, and he really just was looking for someone to get him art supplies, to make copies of his work. And I was over the moon. I mean,
Oh my gosh.
Tim Burton kind of embodied stylistically everything that I was interested in at the time. And to have that kind of access to him, he was incredibly generous to me. He showed me everything that he was working on. He had all these amazing drawings. He had all these sculpted 3D figures that he was working on. And, essentially my job was to take his original drawings and go to, because they didn't have color copiers at that time, to go to the local copier store and make copies of these things. And years later, I was at the Tim Burton retrospective at the MoMA in New York City, and sure enough, on the wall were all of these drawings that I had in my hands.
Wow.
And I just felt so privileged that I got to see it. But the other thing that's kind of relevant to picture books was I had never seen anybody do a picture book like that. For someone who really grew up on the Velveteen Rabbit and Frog and Toad and Stone Soup and books like that, stylistically, I thought picture books were sort of fixed on a particular art style. And here was this guy creating these really weird characters and these bright colors. And I remember thinking instantly that if he can do a picture book, then there must be room for me to be able to do one. And the experience really, I think it really enforced my desire and need to somehow be a part of either his world or a world like it. I remember once I graduated, my plan, and I had actually gone out to California to potentially work as a production assistant on his follow-up film, which was Ed Wood. But then another opportunity hit, and that was a chance to work at Marvel Comics. I had done an internship there during college, and I had made a lot of good connections. I didn't know a lot about the world of comics. I was more of a TV kid, but I certainly knew the characters. And I eventually ended up working not at Marvel, but at DC Comics, which was owned by Warner Brothers, and ended up having a 20-year career where I could play with Batman and Superman and, contribute to video games and toys and film and television. So I ended up kind of getting my dream job and being able to learn a lot about publishing and how that works and how professional artists and writers operate in that world. And it was an incredible education that eventually led me to trying my hand at myself at getting into the world of publishing and having the opportunity to do Float.
I love it. And, like you said, you're very smart to put yourself in the right place to where you wanted to kind of get in the direction of where you wanted to go. A lot of people kind of just aren't sure. Or they might just kind of guess at things, but, that was very smart of you. And to have professors and teachers that helped you get where you are is, it's just unbelievably special. And, that is so cool. I love it.
Yeah, and I want to speak to that a little bit because even though it takes a little bit of bravery to perhaps put you either in a different city or an environment that you may feel like you're not ready for, it's good to remember that there are dozens and dozens of people just like yourself that feel the same way, that start out the business the same way you do, not knowing anything. And I think as a kid that didn't know how Hollywood worked, it was easier than you would expect to get in at the ground level and meet people like yourself that have the same passions. And I think that in any creative field, you have to be with people like yourself because it's those people that end up being your peer group and provide opportunities that maybe you didn't stumble upon, but they did and they recommend you. So I think that I was both surprised as a young person, but also thrilled at the fact that it's a Hollywood and toys and, whatever the biggest thing that you can imagine, whatever the industry is permeable. It's a place that you can get access to. You just have to be willing to ask good questions and position yourself for learning. And I I couldn't be happier with the opportunities I had. By the way, I did get a chance to go into Jim Henson's Creature Shop a few times and ask questions and see what that world was like. And I did that as a 20-something-year-old simply because I reached out to them with a letter and asked if I could come by. And more often than not, somebody is going to say, sure.
I love it. Right. Because, a lot of times you're going to hear no,
Right.
but knows whatever. You just move on to the next thing, and
Right.
you might hear the yes. So that's
Right,
wow.
exactly. No, no is not the answer. It's just an opportunity to pivot and try to find somebody else. But I share that only in the fact that nothing is impossible. And as a creative person, you also have to be creative in the way that you explore these opportunities. And again, be open to whatever comes your way because you never know who you might meet.
Right.
The world of creativity is really about networking and being able to know a lot of people. So.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you if there were any challenges, that you didn't expect when you first began, and you might have something to go with that, but the answer to me is that if you did, it seems like obviously you've just kind of kept going and found the different route to see what open doors there were.
I would agree with that. I think that I was a bit undeterred because I never really felt like there wasn't going to be an opportunity. I mean, I worked on studio sets where I was literally screwing in light bulbs on a set. And that never bothered me because I knew I was still in the right place. And at any point, I was going to have a conversation with someone that might offer an opportunity to me. I mean, I certainly didn't want to screw in light bulbs, but I was never the type of person that was particularly picky about either not feeling I was in the right place or doing things that I felt were beneath me. I really took it all in because I think the point is to, when you're in the environment, you understand how it works. And of course, you get to meet people and you'll make friends, and those friends will think positively of you and recommend you for things. So I think as far as challenges, I I no doubt was very fortunate, but I also think that my openness to learn, regardless of what the experience was, made me not feel disgruntled about the path that I took, and it made me able to better maneuver around anything that might have been in my way. So.
Do you look back and think, this isn't how I envisioned it? Or is it exactly how you envisioned it? Or did you envision it at all? The creative world is so up in the air.
Yeah, I love that question actually because I actually did not put in front of me a destination. I knew that I wanted to do something that excited me, and that seemed to be all I needed. And whether I ended up at Hasbro making toys or at Nickelodeon or somewhere on the Warner Brothers studio lot, I felt like there were enough choices out there that I would have been happy at any of those places. I think what was more important to me is that I was working on creative brands or themes that I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to contribute in some way. I mean, I got to play with Batman. I mean, there's nothing better, but I would have easily have been happy, working on any sort of animated show or anything. So I think having openness gave me a lot more confidence to just, if I suddenly felt passion rising, then I was good. And that's what I needed.
Oh, that's perfect. Some people might be too rigid in exactly what they want to do, but not see that, their opportunities in front of them, or what they end up doing is, just as beautiful and, worthwhile and rewarding. So after you did, worked through, with Batman, Superman, DC Comics, where did you decide, when is this opportunity now to start looking at picture book illustration and writing?
Some of it was logistical. My family and I had eventually moved out of New York. We ended up moving back to New Hampshire. The dynamics were such where uh, there was an opportunity for me to try my hand at freelancing, working more at home and being with my daughters. And I had, at that point, really wanted the opportunity to do what I had been doing for others for many years, which was as an art director and an editor, I really got to help a lot of aspiring artists in the comic book world get their start. And I just remember thinking that I perhaps wanted someone to do that for me. So, because I knew so much about publishing already, I think I also knew the shorthand about what what makes a professional artist successful just from a relationship standpoint. I had worked with artists that got work all the time, and I had worked with artists that were never hired again. And that had nothing to do with their talent, but everything to do with their ability to be reliable. Could they make deadlines? Were they collaborative? Were they willing to listen to suggestions or what the client was looking for? Ultimately, the people that I hired the most were the people that were collaborative and were willing to be open to ideas, because the creative process is all about teamwork. You're always going to be working with a group of people that have opinions and have input and have power over what ultimately is created. And I think the best creative people I've ever worked with are the ones that say yes or yeah, let's do it.
I love it. Right.
I think for me, that was very helpful in understanding how to present myself when an opportunity to create my own projects became a reality. I really wanted to work with the team, and I think that also helps too. I wanted feedback, I wanted the support and the encouragement to know that the projects that I want to do have value and that everybody was contributing what they could to make them the best versions that they were. So, transitioning into publishing professionally was exciting. And I think having the ability to lean on other people was everything that I was hoping it would be.
And so speaking of your book, Float is out in the world, and the illustrations are so immersive and colorful. I wish we could show what that is, but this is a audio only podcast. But what was that process for you creating the book and the experience of, you have so many fish in here, you have so many details, the colors of the protagonist, little girl Rosie, going through these fish tanks. How was that creating for you, that creative process?
It always starts with a story. And I think for me, it had actually started not with a story, but with a passion I had that I was desperately trying to figure out how to employ, which was I wanted to create a story where I could draw ocean animals. I don't know what it is about ocean animals. Maybe ocean animals feel like cartoons to me. They're incredibly colorful and each of them are quirky. It, for me, feels like a very welcoming environment. There's a lot of world building. It sort of checked a lot of boxes for me. And I think figuring out how to do a story about ocean animals took me a few tries. I think what was the turning point for me was that I had a friend who was telling me about this story where he was on the beach with his family and a seagull had stolen all of their food. And it had clicked for me that I don't really know what I would have done if a seagull had stolen my food. I don't know if I would have been embarrassed or mad, or if I actually would have got up and run after the bird. And it suddenly hit me that I had a premise that I would love to see a character experience themselves. And given I wanted to find a character that was potentially vulnerable to that experience, it seemed like a first grader was sort of the perfect candidate, because I really, really like stories, particularly picture book stories that have a lot of chaos in them, that are very playful, but also have a lot of kindness and heart to them. And if I showcased a little first grader who probably in that situation would be firing out every emotion that hit them,
Mhm.
I just knew that there were going to be a lot of unexpected events that might happen.
Right.
And so that in combination with really wanting to have a protagonist that was a little girl. And I guess to speak on that,
Right. I wanted to kind of learn a little bit more about that.
yeah, I have three daughters myself. I find that in my own experiences as a parent, I feel that little girls in the best way can be very tenacious and determined. And I find that incredibly empowering, particularly for a protagonist.
Right.
I like that there's a balance of emotion and determination that I wanted to somehow capture in the character of Rosie. The other thing is that I have Rosie. Rosie was really modeled after my grandmother, who was this little 4'11", had fiery red hair, was very gregarious, but also would certainly not have let a seagull get away with stealing her food. So there was this embodiment of, I don't know, she would have said that she was a firecracker, but to me, all of those ingredients sort of match the perfect hero for me. I think in finding, and again, all stories are about finding a situation that you put your protagonist through. I really did want to explore a story about how this little girl would respond to this situation she was not expecting. One of the major themes of this book is, how do we respond when life throws us a curveball? Which, whether you're a kid or an adult, none of us are really prepared for situations that we don't expect. And it's really tough to regulate just a flurry of emotions that all come out at the same time. This story, to me, was about putting her in a situation where she's running through an environment, the aquarium, which is traditionally a calm place. It's a Zen-like experience to go to the aquarium. There aren't kids running around. Everybody's just sort of staring in awe at this really tranquil experience. And to juxtapose that with this kid that comes out of nowhere and creates havoc in an environment that is not used to that seemed like a great conflict of a lot of events happening all at once. So I really felt like all the pieces came into place when I had a premise that was relatable and something that perhaps any young reader would look at and go, I wonder what I would do.
Right.
So from that, I just conveniently was able to draw all those marine creatures that I wanted to, because they are there just witnessing this chaos unfold and participating in a way that you would expect them to. So I think being able to pull together all of those elements gave me a story that I hope was going to come out, but I really felt was this perfect balance between kind of a funny situation to watch maybe, but also something where I don't think any of us would want to be in that situation for fear of embarrassment or something that was incredibly precious to Rosie. Her lunch, a lunch that her dad had made for her, a lunch that was filled with all her favorite things that she was watching one by one fall into the tanks.
Right. And I can almost feel like this anxiety myself, and as a kid I would have been like, what, it's that what is going to happen that draws you into float, where there's something obviously happening that shouldn't be happening, and you want to know what happens, you want to see how she reacts. And that kind of makes me go back to your friend who told you about the seagull stealing their lunch, and that you took the time to ponder and imagine how you would react in that situation. A lot of people might not necessarily like dwell on that, think of it, but as a creative, you know how to just kind of take that time. And I think that's a really important thing for creatives to do, is to imagine it. And even if it's a tough situation that might be awkward or embarrassing or stressful, that we all experience that. And it's very I guess not just important, but telling that we can kind of see it in a story as time has gone on forever, that we've always told stories and that this little girl has learned something from the story. And I think that, and shares it, not just, learning it as here's your lesson of the day, but how has she experienced it? And maybe for the kids or the readers to think, how would I, deal with the situation? And it kind of trains us to learn how to react, like you were saying, with the things that might not go perfectly. And it's really beautiful. So
Yeah, and I think to your point about asking questions, I think the biggest thing that I got as an art student was understanding the importance of asking questions.
mm.
I think it's an important point to highlight because when we're being creative, we have to always be asking ourselves questions. Like, for example, okay, I drew this particular character with a yellow shirt. What is it about yellow that I like? What is it about this particular yellow that I like? What is that evoking for me? And I think being able to create and constantly being asked, why am I doing this at this particular moment, opens doors constantly. And that to me is the creative process. So I think when one is trying to come up with story ideas, it's always about a what if. I tell the kids when I visit schools to use that prompt to help them imagine, to help start to put pictures into their head. So I ask them, I say, what if my shoelaces were made of spaghetti? And then I say to them, immediately you have pictures popping into your head. So to use a what if prompt is a great way to start any sort of story process because it starts to give you puzzle pieces that you can eventually put together. And for me, it just naturally hit me when that guy was telling me the story about the seagull. I honestly couldn't tell you what I would do in that situation because you're exposing yourself to embarrassment and sharing your emotions. And generally in everyday life, we don't really like doing that.
Right. Oh, and so you said you have been doing school visits already. How has that experience been for you? What kind of feedback are you getting from kids or interesting questions?
I have loved it more than I was expecting that I was going to love it. And I'm really happy to report that. I think as one of your listeners and someone who's creative, it's easy as a creative person to say, I just did this for myself. I just wanted to create it, and then it doesn't really matter what happens afterwards. But I think being able to connect directly to the audience that I was hoping to reach and to be able to ask them questions and see what they are and aren't responding to is such a reward for me in a way that I wasn't expecting. I love the fact that the kids are laughing at the jokes. I love the fact that they are really interested in answering questions like, what would you do in that situation? What would happen if you found a seagull steal your food? Or would you run through the aquarium like Rosie did? It has opened up a dialogue that if I had never shared the story with anybody, I never would have gotten the insight that I have. I'm surprised that I'm able to keep the kids engaged for 45 minutes.
Right. You're right.
I here I am, and I'm dealing with students ages kindergarten up to sixth grade, trying to customize these talks a little bit so that it's age appropriate, but also, I'm not showing a movie. I'm showing images of what the art looks behind the scenes and how I write the stories and trying to give them tools so they can write their own stories. And I have schools coming back to me now saying, I don't know what you did, but the kids are all writing their own stories.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
And I didn't expect that in this process. I didn't expect even the opportunity to be able to share my experience creating this book. I thought perhaps I would be able to do a read aloud, a story time experience. But the fact that I get to share all the pictures that did make it into the book, and how I designed Rosie and all of the iterations that took months to do. I even share a section on the importance of making mistakes. And I share some of the mistakes I made myself in the book. That feels like good information that's going out to kids that might get frustrated when they make mistakes, or recognizing that I don't do it the first time around, and that it's a process, and that making mistakes makes you the artist that you want to be. So I, I don't, I didn't really see myself as someone that would be excited about standing in front of an audience. And it turns out I love it. I even have sort of a full costume that I've created. I bring all of these stuffed animals from the ocean, and I wear shark slippers, and I have a fish shirt on, and I just find that I love it. And just as a side note, there's one portion of my presentation where I talk about it taking me several times to get a particular picture right. And I put on the screen all the different versions of this picture. And then I say to the kids, I don't know, this must have taken me 6, 7 times. And the kids go crazy. And
I love
again,
it.
just for posterity purposes, this is a trend that has been going through these elementary schools for the past 6 or 7 months, where the kids just kind of erupt with excitement when you say 6, 7. And it never gets old for me. I mean, I guess I get into dad mode, but I love
Yeah.
when I can get 200 kids in a room to yell out 6, 7, and I can see the teachers wincing, and it's
That's
just the
awesome.
best.
Yeah, it's such a powerful thing, I think, to experience and to kind of go full circle with, inspiring, someone like you had been, and seeing how your babysitter drew Charlie Brown, and leading kids to want to do what you do, or whatever they're wanting to do, is that, there's mistakes and that you can work through it, and it can be fun, and it's kind of looking ahead at their future. And
It's also important to note that artists don't always get to be in front of their audiences.
right,
I mean, I think, truthfully, if you think about it,
right,
it's very rare that that happens. And school visits or library visits or going to the bookstore really puts you in front of the people that you created that story for. And that's special, it's unique, and it's really informational.
absolutely. Thinking about you as a kid with drawing Charlie Brown, or watching Garfield, what would you tell your younger self about being a creative professional now? Or what would you have, given advice to yourself?
I think for me personally, it would be just reassuring my younger self to stick with your passions, because they're going to lead you in the direction that you want to go. I think that it's easy to either get distracted by other things that excite you, or worse, perhaps be discouraged by either circumstances or other people even that tell you that this is not something to pursue. I was lucky. I had parents that were very supportive. They knew nothing about being a creative person, but I never felt discouraged by them. I got enough encouragement to be brave and explore things that maybe were off the beaten path when it came to trying creative things. I think it's really important to remember that passions are the lifeline of having a good life, and there's no reason why you can't dedicate energy. It doesn't have to be all your energy, but to remember that your passions are what makes things enjoyable. And I think I just would have told myself that if you hang on to what really excites me, you'll find a way there. It may not look exactly the way that you thought it might, but don't 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 let go of them, despite what anybody says. And I think it can be tough to be a creative person because it's not always lucrative. It's not always a reliable outlet for being able to give you some of the essentials that you need on a day-to-day basis. But whether it's a hobby or whether you do it professionally, it's something that I think keeps us human and in contact with our emotions. And for me, I feel very thankful that I didn't give up on them, or that I didn't bump into an experience that made me feel like I wasn't worthy. I felt a little bit of naivete probably helped,
Right.
because I think it takes some bravery to try some things that you are not maybe ready for. But I think that I was so fortunate in having that naivete that it put me in places that maybe as an older person I wouldn't even have tried.
Yeah.
So I think that's what would have kept me motivated if I had heard somebody say that. So
I love it. That's perfect. For, I guess, those out there listening, where can people find you online and where can they find Float?
Float is available for purchase now at my website, which is www.larrydaily.com. And that's LARRYDALEY.com, as well as where books are sold, particularly online at familiar places like Amazon and Barnes and Noble. For those that might be interested in the ISBN number or any specifics about the book, you can go to the publisher, which is Bookling Media. They're located at www.bookling, BOOKLING, media, MEDIA.com. And you can learn a little bit more about what they're doing over there. And hopefully I'll be able to build a community here as I am reaching out to a lot of bookstores and get them excited locally. I'm fortunate enough to live 15 minutes or so from the beach and the ocean. So there are a lot of sort of related themes to love of ocean animals. And I'm excited to see sort of where my adventures take me up and down the coast here.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you were able to be on the show today and share all this with us. It's been really fun and refreshing, and I'm so glad you were here.
Thank you, Becky. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. And we also have to thank our listeners for joining us. If you enjoyed this podcast and found it valuable, please share it with others so we can reach people who might like a bit of inspiration on their own creative journey. I'm Becky Gehrisch, and until next time, happy creating.
Hey there, creative minds. Are you ready for the next burst of inspiration? Make sure to subscribe to the Origins of Creativity podcast in your favorite podcast app for all our latest episodes. Visit booklingmedia.com/podcast for show details, links to connect with us, and so much more. This has been the Origins of Creativity podcast, where inspiration meets imagination.